Welcome back. Day number 4. Reading 3 chapters a day through Joshua for a period of 8 days. Monday through Thursday this week. Monday through Thursday next week. We're now approaching the conclusion of the first half of Joshua. Where we left off, the Gibeonites in chapter 9 had made a treaty under false pretenses with the Hebrews, tricking them into thinking that the Gibeonites were a distant land, whereas they were more immediate, more closely aligned counterpart. Nevertheless, even though it was under trickery, yet the Hebrews elected to maintain their covenant commitment to form not only a peace treaty, but also an alliance. Well, so what occurs in chapter number 10 is that the alliance is tested, because now multiple cities have fallen, Jericho and Ai. Now the Gibeonites have to make a choice how to respond. They respond by making peace. And so this starts to threaten the neighbors of the Amorite region. They feel like either they're going to have to make peace, or they're going to fall as individual cities, or they elect to form their own coalition, Amorite coalition, a southern coalition, to resist the Hebrews. However, they are not going to merely take a defensive posture. They are going to go on the offensive. And where they're going to launch their offensive are toward their neighbors, the Gibeonites. They're another clan within their broader Amorite region. Why? Because the Gibeonites had defected, as it were, and appear to be weaker in the sense that a coalition of these Amorites should be able to take out their Gibeonite brethren, whereas they're much less certain and secure in terms of directing an offensive toward the Israelites. However, this also gives the occasion to put the Israelite and Gibeonite alliance to a test of allegiance. So Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, decides to make his launch against the Gibeonites. The Gibeonites ask for Joshua to come up and help, and he does. And once more, you'll recognize a theme that has been developing here in Joshua's and the historical writings that bear his name, is that God is going to get credit for victory. There are a series of hailstorms. Well, first thing is, it says in chapter 10 that God confuses the armies of the Amorite coalition. Then God sends a hailstorm, asserting his dominance over their god of the weather, Baal, the one so attested in the Canaan land. Then, at the moment when the Amorite coalition is retreating, Joshua realizes that he has them very vulnerable, and it's time to swoop in and go ahead and eliminate this threat entirely. But he's worried that there's going to be, daylight's going to run out, and there he declares sun and for the moon to stand still, to stay put where they were at, and give them more daylight. Well, obviously, this was not Joshua's doing. This was God's doing, once again, asserting himself to be the real victor, the culprit of victory, and asserting himself over the gods of the sun and the moon amongst the land of Canaan. So that day, Joshua and the Israelites defend Gibeon, keep their treaty, and are able to take out quite a threat in terms of this, what's called the Southern Coalition, or the Northern Coalition of these Amorites. Then in chapter number 11, there is this Southern Coalition that then forms, because once again, rather than following the model of making peace as the Gibeonites did, these various coalitions want to rise up and take an offensive. However, once more in chapter number 11, Israel is going to be victorious over this Southern Coalition. That they start eliminating their counterparts very quickly. And again, this is to God's credit. Now, as it moves into chapter number 12, there's a list of 31 kings. There's a list that starts to talk about some of the divisions placed in the land for the various 12 tribes of Israel. Some of these victories are attributed to Moses. This here at the middle portion of the book of Joshua, there's a certain narration that's not in chronological order. It's kind of like a extended footnote, because some of these, out of these 31 kings, some of them are defeated later on in the book of Joshua. Some of them evidently that are listed receive, or to the credit of Moses and the victory, as some of the ones that they were able to defeat. So it's not a chronological injection. It's more of a footnote of what has happened before Joshua, what happens during the first part of Joshua's book, and then what's going to occur later. And so we just wanted to remark on a couple of things before we close out our reading for the week. Here it's attested the Hebrews are marching. They are taking out their enemies. And some have used this section of Scripture to develop what was called a just war theory. And in that, that here, looking in the Old Testament, that God validated certain things, seemingly in terms of warfare, rules of engagement, and all of that. I'm going to talk more about this on Monday, perhaps, certainly before we conclude our Joshua reading. However, I'm not quite sure that we can, I'll be a bit more direct. I don't believe that we can take what's occurring in Joshua under what was called a theocratic government, and translate that or equate that to war today. It's dealing with the theology of war in terms of our Scripture. There's things we'll talk about more next week. Again, I don't think that we take parallels from that and use it to justify how we go to war, because of what ancient Israel did and certain practices that they did that would defy what we identify as the Geneva Convention. Okay, so as we're concluding this first half of this book, the question begs, now that they have driven out and are finishing up driving out the occupants of the Canaan land, how are they going to steward it uniquely? How are they going to steward that land better than the previous occupants? That's perhaps the most pertinent theological question to start wrestling with. There's other questions that we'll start to grapple with next week as we start to try to synthesize our readings and take more of a direction out of what we are to conclude from all of this. Likewise, if you have any questions, please send me an email or message in any kind of way, and we'll wrestle with your questions. I'll keep them anonymous. We'll wrestle with them next week as well. All right, thank you for joining with me in this first week, and I will find y'all again in Joshua 13 next week.